February 2017. I've got the date correct this week. The funny thing last week, as well as saying it was the 28th of February on here, I'd also been to the chemist earlier that day and said it was the 22nd of February, so I don't know where my head was last week, but it certainly wasn't on the correct date. It's a cold and not really anything kind of day outside. It's grey skies, overcast, in Abingdon, in Oxfordshire, in the United Kingdom. We've had an interesting mix of weather this week. We've had storms with Storm Doris blowing through, very high winds, some really heavy rain, but yesterday and certainly on Thursday, a really cold, crisp day. Today it's kind of reverted to type for this time of year. It's cold, it's grey, there's a cold breeze blowing. So spring is still very much on the horizon, but it's very much also still winter here. Thank you if you're a returning viewer. Your support is very much appreciated. Thank you also if you're a new viewer. I hope you enjoy spending some time with me today, and if you like this video, please remember to give it a thumbs up. If you want to hear more from me, then please remember to subscribe as well, and then you'll receive notification when I upload a new video. At the moment, I seem to be doing it now on a weekly basis, having thought I'd only have enough to do it on a fortnightly basis. So it will be anywhere between the next 7 and 14 days for the next video. Most of it depends upon exactly how much time I've had within the previous period to do my craft work, whether it be the sewing or the knitting or the crochet or any other pastime that I've decided to take up between now and then. A year ago I wasn't doing any of these things, so it's all been quite a whirlwind, really. So a little bit about me. My name is Gerard. I'm a crocheter and knitter. I'll stop there. Some of you watching this video, in fact many of you watching this video, will not know me by the name of Gerard, but will know me by the name of Peter. Peter is my second name, my second baptismal name, so I'm Gerard Peter. And a few others will know me by the name of Boniface, which was my monastic name. It's almost an act of geographical awareness. For the most part, I'm Peter in Oxfordshire, I'm Gerard in Salford, and I'm Boniface in North Yorkshire. Although I'm also school governor in Abingdon, and because that's an official position, I use my proper first name, Gerard. So a few of the people in Abingdon will know me as Gerard, so that just makes it even more confusing. If it helps, I answer to most things short of or you, and even then, very often that as well. I have a blog, which is handmedowns.blog. I'll put the link in the information bar below. I'm also known as Hand Me Downs on various sites, Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr, anywhere else, Twitter. And in those cases, the E is in me is replaced by a 3, and the S by a Z, or a Z. I can always say that. I have to remember. Not everybody is from the UK, and I'm fairly relaxed about such things. I also have a Ravelry group, Hand Me Downs, and I put the show notes from this podcast on there, as well as in the blog, and that includes links to the tutorials and patterns that I mention, and also to the suppliers of equipment and yarn that I use. So if you really want to know anything, then that's the place to head to. It's nice and quiet at the moment. My flatmate has 2 sons aged 5 and 8, although the youngest will be 6 in March, and the elder is my godson, and they've gone to their granny's for the afternoon, so it's nice and quiet here. It wouldn't be if they were here. But I made them each a blanket for Christmas. They're very much into their Marvel superheroes, DC Comics and all that. So I made one of them a Captain America shield blanket and the other one a Spider-Man themed web blanket, and I'll put pictures in here for you to see those. So, finished objects. Jump into the deep end. Now I do have several finished objects. I'm quite surprised. This is a finished object that I've actually had for a little while. I forgot to mention it last time, and this is this. Now, fairly unprepossessing looking item. It's actually a double-pointed needle cozy. I've even got press studs. Ta-da! So you put the double-pointed needles in there with the sock coming out and close the press studs, and it keeps them nice and secure inside with the work poking through, so that you don't, if you put them in your bag, you don't either stab yourself when you go in to get the needles out, or they don't fall out of the stitches, because the problem with double-pointed needles is that they've not got anything at either end, so it's very easy for the work to slip off one way or the other. I made this in Tunisian crochet, and I've used the basket weave stitch on that side that I'm using on my blanket, and on this side, just as an experiment more than anything, I did some knit stitches at the top and then some knit and purl ribbing at the bottom. It's not proper ribbing because it's not stretchy in any way, it's Tunisian ribbing as it were. But I did this more as an experiment, and I quite like the self-striping yarn. It's just a basic acrylic Aran yarn that I've got, and I've got some odds and ends and I was using it, and I thought, well, why not make a nice little cosy out of it. And the inside is some of the elephant material that I made one of my bags from. This was a little offcut that I had, so I thought, well, why not pop it in there. So yes, very thrifty. So that's that. I made it, as I say, with my Tunisian crochet, lovely Tunisian crochet hook. I think one of the things I've mentioned before is equipment for knitting and crocheting is obviously directed mostly at women, because they make up the vast majority of knitters and crocheters. And I think this pouch is a good case in point. It's a nice pouch. It's a very nice pouch. It's very attractive, but it's a bit girly. You know, it's peach, it's pink. I wear pink shirts now. I wore peach shirts in the 1980s because, frankly, let's never talk about the 1980s ever again, the decade that fashion forgot. But, you know, I'm not averse to pastel shades. It's just a little bit, yeah, I'm not sure I'd want to carry it out in public kind of thing, you know? It's the combination of flowers and peach, it's all a bit, Anyway, so I shall probably crochet myself a crochet hook holder, which sounds almost like cannibalism, but anyway, not quite, because the crochet hooks are not going to be eaten by the holder, they're just going to be held by it, but yeah. Anyway, so that's that. I've finished my TARDIS bag, my TARDIS themed bag, more than TARDIS bag. I've crocheted the exterior, the hexagonal base there, and the sides coming up with the white standing for the windows at the top, and the black draw cord symbolising where it says police public call box, and then the blue for the roof and the whites. But inside is my lovely starry night sky material. I didn't use interfacing on this bag. I actually used proper foam stabiliser. So I have quite a rigid bag. It's a very nice bag. It works extremely well. And the draw cord brings it all up together. And yeah, I think overall I'm quite pleased with that. It's a very nice thing. I don't think it'll ever catch on commercially, but I quite like it. It's mine. And yeah, very happy with the way that looks. So basically made the inner in a very similar way to the way I've made my other bags, but then just stitched the top by hand to the lining, so just below the black band, and I've just very simply stitched across. I'm not a great sewer, but it was a fairly basic construction, and it works. You can see it's very good. And one other faux from my nearly faux from several weeks ago, and I kind of feel bad that I've forgotten about this. I finished my octopus, Olive the octopus. He's now a sleeping octopus, which is very sweet. So I've just put a couple of blue cotton eyelids on there. So I'll send this off to the hospital this week, and hopefully some premature baby will be cuddling it by this time next week, and having a happier introduction to the world than perhaps might have been feared. Sorry, I'll just... So, yes, my hose. It's virtually a hoe. I had intended to make it a hoe this afternoon, but I'll have to do it after I've finished talking to you today. I've effectively finished my first sock. Ta-da! So, it's a toe-up construction, as you can see, because the top end is still on here, with a 2x2 rib at the top. Fantastic self-striping yarn from West Yorkshire Spinners. This is their Air Valley Aran, and it's in their cocktail range, I think it's called, and this is Blue Lagoon, which is just, oh, it's just wonderful. I'm so excited about having finished this. I just need to bind it off at the top, which I've got to watch the video for because it's a looser elastic bind off in order to allow my foot to get inside. I did a lot better on the heel with the wraps and turns than I did on the toe, which is good. It's a sign that I'm learning. The gaps are not as big, so I'm really quite pleased with the way it's turned out. I think it's I just love the yarn. I mean, the foot looks huge compared to the sock, but the sock, of course, does stretch. It's a ribbing sock, so my leg will go inside. I don't know. I'm in two minds. I might carry on for a few more inches up the leg. I've gone as far as was recommended, but I quite like the idea of a longer sock. I tend to wear socks, I'm just feeling now, that go about a third of the way up my calf, which is where this would go, so it wouldn't be out of order to stop there. But I just quite like the idea of having a longer sock. So, especially if I'm making them myself, I've got another ball of this wool, so I can actually, I've still got half a ball left. So it wouldn't be impossible for me to just carry on and make a bigger sock. So I might do that. I'll just see how I feel afterwards. That was my provisional cast on. Well, I'll leave it in there because I'll need to do it again for my next one. And I'm using the Zings, Knit Pro Zings. These are fantastic needles. I love using them. I've been knitting on the train and on the bus. Anyone who follows me on Instagram has seen the pictures. I had to go to High Wycombe for work the other day, and I was on the train going and coming back and knitting, and I got off the train and onto the bus to go home, and I was sitting there knitting, and a couple of people have looked and, I mean, is my knitting any more unusual than somebody sitting there with headphones going... I think I'm probably causing less of a disturbance. Anyway, I don't mind, I don't care. It makes the journey disappear into nothing, almost, and I'm getting a pair of socks to the bargain, so I'm quite happy with that. So that's my hoe, my half-finished object. Pop that over there. Oh, yes, I've not mentioned, sorry if I just lean over here a second. My tea for the day. I'm just going to pour myself my cup. My rinky-dinky little teapot. Today's tea is Twining's ginger tea. So it's actually a herbal tea rather than a tea, as it were. Excuse me a second. Delicious. They call it, I've got the box here. It's spiced ginger, and it contains, if I can read the ingredients, ginger root, licorice root, which is interesting. I love licorice, so that's not an issue for me. I just didn't notice any in there. Cinnamon and cloves. So it's just a very nice warming drink on a cold grey day. And it's a bit of sunshine in my life. It's a very pale yellow tinge to the tea, so that's quite nice. So, whips. I have the other whips going on. I mean, technically the socks are a whip, and I'm still doing my snowflake blanket and a couple of other things that I've talked about previously. But the major new whip of the week is a new corner-to-corner blanket. A colleague at work, well, where else would a colleague be? A colleague is one with whom one works. A colleague who is also a friend has seen my blog and likes it, and asked me if I could make his son a skull and crossbone blanket. Now, slightly cross purposes here. Heath meant, as in the granny squares, and just design a skull and crossbones and do a series of those on a blanket. I heard corner to corner Grafgan. He wouldn't have heard that. Hello, Toby. Do you want to come and say hello? Come here then. All right, here we go. There's a good boy. There's Toby. That's right, you go away. So, I've started. I'm just wondering which way round it goes. That's row 28, so that will be up there, so it goes this way round for you. There we are. So this is what I've made so far. This is the first 28 rows. It's the bottom right-hand crossbone. So it will be a proper pirate flag when it's finished. It will be 70 squares by 70 squares in size. So there's a lot more pattern going to appear. And I've been asked by a couple of people if I can do a demonstration. Well, I'm a bit reluctant about doing a demonstration, simply because I'm not an expert by any stretch of the imagination. I'm very much a newbie on these things. I haven't actually completed a Grafgan yet, so I'm basically learning on the job. But I'm quite happy to show what I'm doing, so I've got 3 little videos that I'll insert. Well, I've been asked to give a demonstration on the corner-to-corner blanket that I'm making. I don't really have the facility to set it up properly, so it's not going to be a very professional demonstration. But I've got this far so far, and as you can see, that's the bottom right-hand crossbone of the skull and crossbones. I have a chart. I can't show it to you because it's a paid-for pattern. But basically, I take the chart and I count up. If I'm doing odd rows, they come from the bottom to the bottom left to the top right, and even rows from the top right to the bottom left. So you're going diagonally all the time, creating the rows. I've counted up. I know I've got 10 black squares, 2 white squares, and then 15 black squares, which is right because I'm on row 27 of this particular pattern. And the way you begin, I'll see if I can actually do it on the camera for you, is you chain 3, 1, 2, 3, pinch that and chain another 3, and that becomes the first part of the square. And then you need to put a treble crochet, which in US terms is a double crochet, into each of the first 3 chains, so that you end up with chain 3 and 3 treble crochets, which I'll just do for you. As I say, I'm not really equipped to show you very much on here because I don't have the right kind of equipment for filming demonstrations. I'm also at this stage of my development as a crocheter and knitter. I'm not really that competent. I can do what I can do, whereas other people have very good demonstrations. Probably doesn't help that I'm wearing a dark shirt either, but I'll show you again when I move to the white. After you've completed the square, in order to anchor it to the side, on the last square of the previous, there's the 3 treble crochets and the 3 chains here, and so you slip stitch between the chain 3 chain and the group, and that anchors the square, so you've got the next one there, and then it's a case of chain 3 up and treble crochet 3 times into that same space where you've just slip stitched. Again, I'm not really showing you very much here, black on dark blue, but I'll do some more when I get to the white. And again, once you've completed that square, slip stitch it to the next gap between the 3 treble crochets and the chain 3 space, and chain 3 again. So I've now moved on and I've completed most of the first 10 squares on this row. I've actually done the chain 3 and 2 treble crochets. I'm now going to be changing colour from the black to the white for the 2 white squares. So what I'll do is I'll half complete a treble crochet. So I've yarned over, pulled through, yarned over and pulled through 2, and there are 2 loops left on the hook. I'm then going to cut the black, leaving enough to sew in afterwards. Leave that to the side and pick up my white with the tail end, and I'll hook over the white and bring that through the last 2 loops there, and carry on making the squares now with the white. So it's slip stitch into the gap between the chain 3 and the 3 treble crochets of the previous row. Pull down the black and the white stragglers so that it tightens them up, and then chain 3, 1, 2, 3, then 3 treble crochets, so it's yarn over through the loop made by the chain 3, pull up a loop, so I've got 3 loops on the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Sorry, this acrylic yarn is very scratchy and strong, and it's also very resistant to being pulled. So again, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, pull through 2. Yarn over, through the loop, yarn over, pull back, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So that's 1 chain 3 and 3 treble crochets, which you can see on the white on the dark background now. Slip stitch to the gap between the chain 3 and the 3 treble crochets of the previous row. Slip stitch and 3 chains, and then 3 treble crochets again. Bearing in mind that I'm changing again to black, so only pull through 2, so I have 2 loops left on the hook. Put that the work, cuts leaving a length for sewing in later. Pick up my black again, make it a suitable length, over the hook, whoops, try and do that in one move this time, over the hook, pull through, and then slip stitch to the next square, chain 3, and just pull those stragglers tight in order to tighten up the work, and then carry on with making my squares till the end of the row. And I think that is probably as much as I can show you at the moment. I'm still on the increasing rounds, the increasing rows, so I add a square at both that end and at that end, so this will be 27 squares wide, the next row will be 28 squares wide, and so on. The overall dimensions are a 70 by 70 square, so once I get to the 70th, I then start to decrease. My hands are away up here, you can't see them, so I'm currently increasing out to those 2 sides, and when I turn that corner, they'll start to decrease back down to a single square on the other side. So it's 70 up and then 70 back. I'm on the final part of this demonstration now. I've completed this row, and I've put a stitch marker in here to just make sure that the yarn doesn't come out while I'm working on sewing in my ends. They're rather attractive, on this end, sorry, rather attractive stitch markers. I'll be talking more about those shortly, so I won't say anything else, but it's a beautiful black kitty cat, and I don't know if you can actually see, but it's actually quite sparkly as well. I've sewn in 2 of my ends already, but I wanted to just show you why I do this. It's a particular issue with corner-to-corner blankets, which is that you can avoid all of the sewing in of ends by just carrying the yarn up, particularly such a small gap. It's only 2 squares of white, so I could have carried the black up alongside the white. It would come up along this side and along this side, and then would have reappeared here, and I could have done that. The problem with that is that would, on the one hand, produce a little snag of yarn that could be pulled, and particularly with this being a children's blanket, children will pull at things without even meaning to sometimes, so it would weaken the structure of the blanket itself. The other thing is, by sewing in the ends, you make the blanket entirely reversible. Both sides are exactly the same, so it's a way of having a nice blanket. It won't be identical because the right will be on the left and the left will be on the right, but it will still be perfectly usable as a blanket on both sides. So to sew in the ends is such an easy thing to do, and to bear in mind, every time you change a colour, you have two ends that need weaving in. So I've changed the colour twice, from black to white and then from white back to black. So that would be four ends to sew in. And if I didn't do them at the end of each row, I'd have four for each and every colour change. And I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 so far. So that would be 36 ends already just from this small piece of work that would need sewing in at the end of the piece. And of course, as it gets bigger, there'll be many more colour changes as the pattern becomes more complex towards the middle and then gets simpler again. And I think, for me, sewing in as part of the process of finishing the line makes it less onerous. Weaving in ends is never an exciting thing to do. It's not the creative bit of knitting or crochet. But I think if you make it part of the work of each line, then it becomes part of the rhythmic, repetitive action that we all love about crochet and knitting anyway. So where I'm going to sew it in, I find the best places where the 3 treble crochets have come up from the through the 3 chain space of the previous square is actually the best place to sew in. So I go through one way, and then, oops, it's coming out a little, there we are. It's very difficult to sew backwards because I'm pointing it towards you rather than towards me. Then go back the other way through the same stitches, and then once more back the other way. And the reason you do it 3 times is because nothing can be pulled in 3 separate directions simultaneously. So if I'm pulling it this way, it can't be pulling this way and this way again, so it will actually firmly lock itself in place. And then just take your scissors and snip it off. And one other thing, I never, ever, ever throw these pieces of yarn away. I have a nice plastic box, I keep them inside. This is a tip from my mother, which I've noticed a couple of other podcasters have talked about as well. It's a very thrifty tip. This is ideal stuffing for amigurumi, I can never say that word, or any other toy that you make. It's just yarn. It's not going to be harmful, it will stuff a toy, and it's cheaper than buying the polyester filler that we use. I use both, in fact, but I've made a couple of things and I've stuffed them with this, and it's ideal for that purpose. And waste not, want not, as my mother would say. And I think, being the wartime generation and rationing generation, you know, these thrift lessons were very important for people of her generation, and I think we could probably learn a lot about living more simply, and that's something I want to talk about at the end of this video anyway. So I will leave that there, and I'll just finish stitching this across with my darning needle 3 times, and it's done. As you can see, as I say, it's a very rhythmic thing to be doing. Do that 4 times, and that's the line finished. So that's the process I'm following, and I think, yeah, I think it's. I've noticed that there are a number of other ways. I use the 3 chains and 3 treble crochets, which is the first one I learned when I did a little kind of swatch as a starter, just to see. And I've seen other people do 2 chains and 3 treble crochet, half treble crochets. That is, sorry. And I don't think it actually matters. Obviously, the bigger the block, then the quicker the blanket will grow, but the less definition you'll have. It's a bit like, think of the old newspaper photographs. It's pointillism, effectively, where you have lots of little dots, and the more little dots you have, the more resolution the picture has. Well, the graph gun is a very similar thing. If you make bigger squares, then you either have to make a super huge, ginormous blanket, or you end up with less resolution, so you make a very blocky picture. I think it's also important to note that I'm actually using cream and black rather than white and black. In my mind, bones aren't white, they're actually ivory, almost quite literally. And I think it's a lovely high contrast between the cream and the black. But you can use as many colours as you like, because, as I've showed in the video, you're just making individual blocks, and you can have a blue block and a green block and a brown block and a red block and a purple block and a white block and a yellow block and another turquoise block and a purple block again. So you could actually design almost any image you like. You could make a picture of a family member, and that might be a nice thing to do, as long as you can divide up the colours into the blocks. And that requires a degree of skill, and I bought this pattern from somebody who has that degree of skill. Her name is Vanna, and she's on Etsy as Miss Crow, C-R-O, which I think probably stands for crochet, and she has other patterns which I'm considering buying as well once I've done this. And it was very reasonably priced, and I really think it's a very good design, and I think it's going to turn into a very good blanket. So that's the only new whip I have. So I think I can talk about equipment and acquisitions. I've not done this week I had a sudden influx of huge amounts of equipment. I've not been on a spending spree recently, it's just that some things have taken a little time to get here, and I have spent some money as well. But I've not bought any yarn this week. Going to get withdrawal symptoms. So I think I'll start with the final piece, actually, I've just remembered. On the blanket I showed you this stitch marker. This wonderful little kitty cat, and I think you can see the sparkly colours even better now that the light is actually coming from behind the camera. These are the Lucky Black Cats stitch markers from a company called Charmed Knitting. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram as Charmed Knitting. I bought these via Amazon on my Amazon Prime membership. And they come in this, the packaging is superb. Actually, I'll put a picture of the packaging that it came in, and this is exactly how it came. And they have this lovely card. In fact, I'll show you the card because that's got their details on. So there's this lovely card, and on the back has got all of their details. So as you can see, you can find them almost anywhere. I can thoroughly recommend them if you're buying them for yourself or if you're buying them for a gift for somebody else, because they are beautiful items. And not only that, but they're extremely generous. So the packaging, as you'll have seen, is very pretty. So I got 5 of the pussycats, the Lucky Black Cats. As you can see, there's 4. And this little symbol here is actually another stitch marker of a different kind that came with the packaging, which is very, very pretty. Little heart on both sides, and it's a good place marker on when you're knitting in the round, for example. So that's those. Once you buy stitch markers, it's the kind of thing you can buy lots and lots and lots of. So I then also quite liked another set, which is their Crochet Diva. Even though I'm a Crochet Devo, I'll go with Diva for the sake of argument. And I wonder if you can see these. So there is a tape measure, a set of buttons, a little heart with a coronet on. I'll see if I can separate them out a bit better. Coronet with a crown on, the Crochet Diva. A pair of scissors, and then a ball of yarn, which helpfully says yarn on it, and then again one of those lovely little stitch markers that were on the outside of the gift. So those 2 came, and that's what I ordered, and that's wonderful. But as an extra little surprise, and what was very generous of them, I also had included this little pussycat as well. So that was very nice. I was very touched by that. So I can thoroughly recommend them, either for yourself or as gifts for other people. They're on Amazon and Facebook and Instagram and the like, so, if you're in the market for stitch markers, that's who to go for. So I did pop into Mason's this week, though I didn't actually, as I say, I didn't actually buy any yarn. A year ago when I started sewing, actually it must be 2 years ago I started sewing, I went and bought a sewing box because I needed one, and it's this wonderful little box. with the owls on top, which I just thought was lovely. It has what you expect in a sewing box. It has an inset tray and then space underneath for equipment to go in, and that was very nice. And I thought, I could do something for my bits and pieces for knitting. I have boxes and jars and things, but I just thought I quite like something. Well, I didn't get that because I saw this project bag and I thought, I really, really, really have to have that project bag. It's a beautiful bag. Sorry, just a loose thread from something else. Would you just look at this bag? Is it not superb? The fox is just so foxy. Many of the same characters on the back, but I just love this bag. It's such an attractive bag, and it's quite a good bag. It opens out flat. It's as a square bag. It's got pockets on both sides for you to put things in, as well as the yarn down the middle. So I've already started using it, and several of my friends want to have it, and I'm not going to let them have it. Unfortunately, I have no idea who made it. The only label on it was the price tag. There was no information at all about the manufacturer or anything, so I can't give any advice on this. It was the only one in the shop. And on top of that, they were 10% off at the time as well, which I didn't know until I went to the till, so that was quite a pleasant surprise. I'll just pop that back in there. And along with the the fox, I bought a pin cushion. This adorable sheep. I love the fact he's wearing glasses. I have to wear glasses when I sew and knit, and when I'm doing close-up work. I'm 48 now, so unfortunately I'm not as young as I once was, and my eyesight, while still very, very good, when I'm doing the close work, I need to be wearing the reading glasses for that. But I just think he is such an adorable sheep. I actually don't want to stick pins in him, but I will do. I'm not that sentimental. The other main acquisition this week were knitting looms. I don't know why I bought knitting looms. Well, yes, I do. As I said, I'm a school governor of a very good primary school in Abingdon. And the school operates something called Launchpad, which is a way of introducing children to extracurricular ideas. And someone saw my French knitting loom, the little soldier who's around somewhere in one of my boxes, and suggested it was something actually that could be done with the school children, and it could. It's very simple. You just get a toilet roll tube and some lollipop sticks and stick them on one so that it's kind of north, south, east, west, overlapping the top so that they stand proud of the top, and then you can use that as the knitting loom. But you can also paint and decorate those things, and children can use their imaginations, and then you can make something with the eye cord that's produced from the knitting loom. And I thought I quite like the idea of doing more complex knits on knitting looms, so I bought 2 lots. These were the first ones that came. So these are rectangular, and these actually came with 4 pom-pom makers as well, which I wasn't expecting, even though it's there on the description on Amazon. I just didn't expect it. But these are really sturdy, very well made, bright colours, which I love. And as you can see, they'll require iron acrylic weight yarns, I'd have thought, as well. Something quite robust, because the gaps between the pins are actually quite large, and obviously being moulded plastic, they're not movable. But, there are 4 different sizes there, and I'm sure I can get cracking and start making some interesting designs. I'll have to start watching some... I've already started watching some YouTube videos, but I'll have to pay more attention and get some projects underway with those. And they come in a very nice box, so it keeps them nice and safe. Knit Quick Long Knitting Loom Set, it's called. H&S Alliance. I don't know what the H&S stands for, so I can't enlighten there. And I then bought some circular ones as well, which I won't need to get out as well either. But this comes in a very nice carry bag as well. And yeah, I'm quite looking forward to getting to grips with some of these. The smaller one is actually a sock loom, so it may be that I can learn to make socks that way. Apparently it's a lot quicker, so that will be interesting. And both sets came, I've actually got them in one of my sweet box from Brittany. Very attractive. So they come with these pointed hooks, because you wrap your yarn around, and then each one, a bit like a normal French knitting loom, so you'd have a piece of yarn around the bottom of this, and then wrap a piece of yarn around the top, and you use this to pull the bottom yarn over the top one and off the loom so that you get the stitch. And then there are other versions of the stitch, so you can do pearls and that kind of thing. And they came with 2 yarn needles as well, so I'll just keep those in there. And yeah, on that, I mean, I keep, again, it's something I learned from childhood. Oak bottles. This was a bottle of pesto sauce for pasta. I keep my stitch markers in. I've got another one that contains the attachments for handles for bags, and I've got another one with the lobster claw clasps in them, and they're very useful for just keeping your little notions in one place and safe. And I have a Dalek. This, I think, was a pencil case, but I keep my double-ended crochet hooks in there, and a pair of scissors, and various other bits and pieces. I would say, you can make this hobby as much fun as you like, and it can reflect your other hobbies as well. Not that watching a TV program is a hobby, and it just makes it a more holistic approach to life in a way, and it's nice having little bits and pieces around the place. Excuse me while I just have a drink. I've been babbling on quite a while now. Other bits and pieces I've got are not recent acquisitions, but I just thought I would talk about them. When I first started knitting, I watched some podcasts, and one in particular was an American girl. I can't remember her name, and I can't find her podcast now. I can't remember what it was that I looked for in order to find her, and it was possible that she was the 4th or 5th video on a playlist that started when I picked a different video, so I've just never been able to find her again. But she had a knitting bag, and this is a version of it. It's not very robust, and I've had to put some cardboard inside to make it firmer, and what I'm planning to do is crochet a cover for them to make it more attractive. But there are 6 compartments, and the lid has 6 holes, eyelets holes, and the yarn is fed through, and so you can keep your yarn separate if you're making several projects, or one project with several colourways. And the strands are always kept separately, and as you've used them, you let go, and it pops back, and it's just a way of storing yarn. And there are pockets at both ends that I keep pads in, and you could keep your needles or your hooks in and carry it around with you. It's a very robust bag. It's just a shame there isn't any internal structure, so I think the expectation is you simply ram as much yarn into each of the divisions as you can, which is fine. But, I don't do that. So that's why I've put the cardboard in, and that's made it strong enough to hold my cat sitting on it. So that's, it's not too bad, Heath Robinson-esque contraption. And the other, well, I think I mentioned in the video, but I'll just mention it again. Make, do and mend, and that whole waste not, want not culture of the war years and the rationing years after the war, Second World War, that is. I never ever throw away a piece of yarn. So every project I make, every offcut I have, goes into this box, and I simply use it as a substitute for stuffing. If I make amigurumi, said it properly that time, amigurumis, or any of the other little shapes I make, like the bunting I made for Halloween, the pillow I made for Christmas, use the yarn, and I just keep it in a... I don't eat that many chocolates. This is quite an old box, actually. I think I got this from work. In fact, this may have been a box that was brought in by a former operations director. because I never let a box go to waste. I've got lots and lots of tins and plastic boxes from anywhere that I see them. Really, they're very useful for storage. And you know, why pay £5 for a storage box when you can pay £5 for a box of sweets and then have a storage box? You know. Anyway, whatever the case, the other thing I have is a lever arch file, and within the lever arch file I have lots of these plastic wallets, and within the plastic wallets I have lots of patterns. So if I see something online and think, oh, I like that, or if I buy a pattern, I just print it out on my printer, which is a colour printer, and store them in here. And sometimes they're things I've not yet made. These are sewing patterns. Sometimes they're things I have made and I've made notes on. So I made a very attractive, well, the official pattern is an alpine shawl, but the video I made it from called it a pineapple shawl. I think I've mentioned it previously, and I can put a picture in here of it. I'll just see if I can see. But I also, I want to show that one because there was actually, yes, there it is. There was actually a mistake in the pattern, and so on the side I've just written the corrections, so that if I make another one, I know where I am. So yes, so I find that very useful. You can buy a pack of, I think, either 50 or 100 of these plastic wallets for £1 in a pound shop, and that's certainly where I got them from. So you know, it's a very easy way of storing, so you don't have lots of pieces of paper and can never find what you're looking for. I was just reminded of this by remembering my mother's patterns, so I've not yet looked through those and decided what I want to make, so as soon as I have, I will let you know, and we'll take it from there. So yes, this was another, I love this container. It's a plastic sweet container. It had licorice all sorts in it, as you can see. Puts it that way around with some scraps of yarn in it, and it actually becomes quite a pretty, almost like a sweet shop jar of old. And you know, as I'm like a grown kid in a candy shop, as they say. Whenever I see bits of yarn, I think, oh, what could I make with that? What could I make with that? How can I, you know? So it's quite nice to have that on the table. I've got a couple of these hanging around the place with just the odd ends of scraps of yarn in. I'll probably at some point make one of the memory blankets with these. Either knit it or crochet it, or even both. I mean, I'm not averse to mixing and matching, as I feel. So, excuse me a second. Talking for an awful long time does make me thirsty. So I just want to move on to the recommendations now, and in podcast area, I just want to make a correction. I referred last week to sword in the knitting. I don't know, or sword and the knitting. I don't know what I was thinking of. It was sword of a knitter is the person I meant. So that's SWORD of a knitter. And he has, I've been catching up with his podcast from the past. He's just had some exciting personal news recently and has podcast in the last week. And yeah, I think we're going to see a lot more of him again. He's busy. Josh is the name of the podcaster, and he's busy working on new designs. So it's well worth looking in on him. The other podcast that I've really enjoyed watching is The Grocery Girls. Jodie and Tracy are a pair of sisters in Edmonton, Alberta, in Canada, and they work in the family grocery store, hence their podcast name. And to say they have an earthy sense of humour. It's probably the best way of describing it. Particularly Jodie. There isn't anything Jodie isn't prepared to talk about. You have been warned. Having said that, they are great fun. They are very talented. They're very funny people. They're very warm and friendly people. It's really like sitting in on a coffee circle of gossip, sharing time with them. And they've just themselves yesterday announced some wonderful news for them. And for us as well. They have been invited by Craftsy to work on a podcast of sorts with them as well, which will be called Off Our Needles. That hasn't started yet. I think starts sometime in March. They have been filming them already, but obviously there's post-production work that needs to be done. So yes, looking forward to that. So I can thoroughly recommend the Grocery Girls, and if Off Our Needles is anything like the Grocery Girls, I can thoroughly recommend that as well. And the other podcast I would recommend this week is Dairyland Knits. Another Joshua. He, I think, is from, is it Pennsylvania? But he's living in Wisconsin, which would be right, I think, because that's the dairy country, isn't it? Wisconsin, I think. Anyway, he's moved from the East Coast to the Midwest, let's put it that way. And he is a real hoot. He was, poor thing, in his most recent podcast, he was clearly suffering from the ill effects of a cold. It's that time of year, it's what you expect. And you can probably hear in the back of my own voice a little headiness. I don't quite have a cold, but it's yeah. But he's great fun, and really very funny, and again, very warm, very kind, very friendly, and also very earthy humour, which I like. I'm quite, I have quite an earthy sense of humour as well. So it appeals to me, but if it doesn't, then there are plenty of other podcasters out there. So TV, yes. Well, The Walking Dead. I'm not going to give any spoilers, but I would say if anybody has watched last week's episode, there is